Google, the fall of a titan? In brief, the 6 key points of the article. OpenAI, a direct threat. With its revolutionary AI-based browser and the recruitment of Google Chrome experts, OpenAI is taking on Google's dominance in web browsing. Antitrust lawsuit in the United States. The DOJ accuses Google of abusing its dominant position, with potential sanctions such as the separation of Chrome and Android or the sharing of strategic advertising data. Repeated European fines. More than $8 billion imposed since 2017 for anti-competitive practices, impacting Google's legitimacy and agility. Online advertising under surveillance. With 80% of its revenue dependent on this sector, Google is exposed to international regulators who could impose major restrictions. AI competition. OpenAI and ChatGPT outperform Google and Bard in innovation and user experience, threatening Google's dominant position in this field. Risk of an AltaVista ending. Like AltaVista, Google could become obsolete if it does not adapt quickly to changing expectations and disruptive innovations. These combined challenges are forcing Google to reinvent itself to avoid a historic downfall. Introduction: a giant under pressure. The tech giant Google is experiencing a series of setbacks. This giant, once considered untouchable, now faces a series of challenges that threaten not only its market dominance, but also its business model. Threatening clouds are gathering above its head, this time likely to bring it crashing off its pedestal. It is no longer a simple struggle to maintain its lead, but a real battle for its long-term survival. At the heart of this turmoil are serious accusations. Recently, the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, officially declared Google to be in a dominant position, an acknowledgement that sounds like a condemnation. The giant's business practices are deemed anti-competitive, and the consequences could be historic. Among the sanctions envisaged are drastic measures: the separation of flagship products such as Google Chrome and Android, 2 pillars of its ecosystem, or worse still, the obligation to share its strategic advertising data with rivals like Quant, DuckDuckGo, or Bing. This data, considered the digital oil, is at the heart of Google's advertising machine, the main driver of its revenues. Such a decision could not only weaken its position, but redistribute the cards in a market it has long dominated. But these legal challenges are only the tip of the iceberg. An even more direct threat is looming on the horizon: OpenAI, which, after shaking up Google with its ChatGPT AI model, is preparing a new masterstroke. The company aims to launch a revolutionary web browser based on artificial intelligence. This project could redefine the way users interact with the web. By recruiting iconic figures from the team behind Chrome, such as Ben Goodger and Darren Fisher, OpenAI is making it clear that it aims to strike where it hurts: Google's dominance in online browsing. If this project sees the light of day, it could not only divert a significant share of users, but also redefine the browsing experience, making traditional search engines obsolete. Google, once synonymous with innovation and unchallenged supremacy, is therefore at a critical juncture. Between antitrust lawsuits, pressure from regulators, criticism of its advertising practices, and the rise of bold rivals, the giant is surrounded. What once seemed like isolated challenges are now taking the form of a perfect storm. Let's take a closer look at these obstacles, which, when combined, could radically alter Google's destiny. 1. OpenAI, a threat takes shape. OpenAI, known for its revolutionary advances in the field of artificial intelligence, is no longer content to compete with Google in the field of language models such as ChatGPT. The company now has its eyes set on one of Google's historic bastions, web browsing. Indeed, OpenAI is actively working on an ambitious project to develop a revolutionary browser that natively integrates conversational AI. This project could redefine the landscape of online browsing and undermine the dominance of Google Chrome, used by millions of internet users around the world. A browser focused on conversational AI. Unlike traditional browsers, OpenAI's browser would not be limited to displaying search results or loading web pages. It would be able to understand complex queries, respond directly to them, and provide contextualized information in real time. For example, a user could ask a complex question, such as, What are the best ways to reduce my energy consumption in winter? And receive a detailed response combining practical advice, links to reliable resources, and a summary of relevant options. But that's not all. This browser could synthesize information from multiple sources to prevent users from viewing multiple tabs or articles. By combining the intelligence of ChatGPT with an advanced web browsing system, OpenAI aims to simplify and enrich the user experience. Such technology could quickly make traditional search engines obsolete, as they still require manual navigation and user analysis. OpenAI's assets, an offensive strategy. To establish itself in this highly competitive sector, OpenAI has deployed a particularly powerful strategy. Strategic recruitment. OpenAI has recruited Ben Goodger and Darren Fisher, two renowned engineers who played a central role in the development of Google Chrome. These experts are very familiar with Chrome's architecture and weaknesses, giving OpenAI a significant strategic advantage. Their expertise could enable OpenAI to build a more efficient browser that is better adapted to the current needs of users. Differentiating technology. While Chrome remains anchored in a traditional operation centered on manual search and navigation, the OpenAI browser promises a fluid and intuitive interaction thanks to AI. It is no longer a question of searching, but of interacting with a tool that acts as a true digital assistant. This differentiating technology could appeal to users looking for a faster, more personalized, and less laborious experience. Strategic discussions with key partners. OpenAI has engaged in discussions with device manufacturers, including Samsung, to integrate its browser as a native solution on their smartphones and tablets. If such a partnership succeeds, it could allow OpenAI to bypass Google directly and capture a significant share of the mobile market, currently dominated by Chrome and Android. This approach is all the more formidable as it is based on strategic alliances capable of providing an immediate competitive advantage. A clear goal: rewriting the rules of the game. With this initiative, OpenAI is not just looking to disrupt the browser market. The company is aiming higher, redefining the way users interact with the web. If OpenAI's bet succeeds, it could significantly erode Chrome's user base, which is based on a classic and static experience. This would force Google to review its model in depth, not only for its browser, but also for its search engine and advertising tools. A historic challenge for Google. This project puts Google in an unprecedented defensive position. Chrome, which represents a significant part of its ecosystem, could lose its appeal to a competitor that provides more modern solutions focused on user needs. History has shown us that even the most powerful giants can fall in the face of disruptive innovations. Microsoft was overtaken by Google in the field of online search, just like AltaVista before it. Today, Google could in turn be facing a threat it cannot ignore. The OpenAI browser could well be the harbinger of a major upheaval in the digital ecosystem, an area that Google thought it controlled without sharing. If Google does not react quickly and effectively, this offensive could seriously shake its technological hegemony. 2. Antitrust lawsuit in the United States, a historic threat. The lawsuit filed by the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, against Google represents one of the most significant legal challenges the company has faced since its inception in 1998. This trial marks a major turning point in the history of technology regulation in the United States, recalling the landmark cases that led to the dismantling of monopolies such as AT&T in telecommunications or Standard Oil in the energy sector. The DOJ's objective is clear: to limit Google's overwhelming dominance of the digital market by breaking up the practices deemed anti-competitive that allow it to lock in its strategic positions. The charges: a locked domination. The DOJ accuses Google of abusing its dominant position to systematically exclude its rivals and prevent fair competition. Among the practices in question, one of the most emblematic concerns the exclusive agreements that Google concludes with its partners, in particular Apple. According to prosecutors, Google paid Apple billions of dollars to be the default search engine on Safari, the pre-installed browser on iOS devices. This strategy guarantees massive visibility for Google while complicating the task of competitors who struggle to find a place in such a locked environment. In addition to these agreements, the DOJ points to the close integration between Google's various products and services, such as Chrome, Android, and its search engine. This synergy, while effective for users, is seen by regulators as a way to create a closed ecosystem that stifles innovation and limits consumer choice. What are the stakes for Google? If the DOJ is successful, the consequences could be historic, not only for Google, but also for the entire technology industry. Here are the main points of discussion. Separation of Android. Android, which equips more than 70% of smartphones in the world, is one of Google's most powerful levers to promote its services, including Google Search, Chrome, and Google Play. Separating Android into an independent entity would significantly weaken Google's ability to impose its applications and services on smartphone manufacturers. It could also pave the way for greater customization of Android systems by third parties, allowing competitors like Samsung or Huawei to develop their own ecosystems without relying on Google. Fragmentation of Chrome. With over 60% of the web browser market share, Chrome is another strategic pillar for Google. As a gateway to the web, Chrome plays a crucial role in collecting user data, which fuels Google's advertising model. A separation of Chrome would weaken this integrated ecosystem, reducing the effectiveness of Google's advertising services and paving the way for increased competition from alternative browsers, such as Microsoft Edge or Brave. Ad data sharing. One of the DOJ's boldest proposals is to force Google to share some of its ad data with its competitors. This data, which includes crucial information about user behavior and consumption trends, is at the heart of Google's competitive advantage in the online advertising industry. By allowing rivals like Bing, DuckDuckGo, or Yahoo to access this data, the DOJ hopes to level the playing field, thereby reducing Google's dominance. Potential impact on the digital market. If these measures are implemented, they could lead to a complete overhaul of the digital market. Fragmentation of Google's flagship products would weaken its dominant position, opening up new opportunities for competitors and spurring innovation in sectors previously dominated by the company. For example, alternative search engines like Bing and DuckDuckGo could capture a larger share of users, especially those concerned about their privacy. Device manufacturers like Samsung or Xiaomi could develop their own software ecosystems, reducing their dependence on Google. Emerging players in digital advertising, such as Amazon or TikTok, could fill the void left by a possible reduction in Google's influence. For consumers, these changes could result in a greater diversity of options, increased price competition, and faster innovation in digital services. However, they could also lead to short-term disruptions, especially if essential services like Android or Chrome are restructured or fragmented. A historic moment for technology regulation. This lawsuit is part of a larger context of questioning the power of tech giants, not only in the United States but also around the world. European regulators, for example, have already imposed several record fines on Google for similar practices, while countries like India and Australia are stepping up their investigations into the company's business practices. For Google, this lawsuit could mark the beginning of a new era where the company would no longer be able to dictate the rules of the game. The DOJ hopes not only to curb Google's dominance, but also to send a clear message to the entire technology industry. No player, no matter how powerful, is above the law. Conclusion: Google at a turning point. The lawsuit filed by the DOJ is much more than a legal battle. It represents a fundamental challenge to Google's business model and its influence on the digital marketplace. If regulators are successful, it could redefine power dynamics in the technology industry, paving the way for fairer competition and more diverse ecosystems. For Google, the stakes are high. The company must not only defend its position in court, but also convince users, partners, and regulators that it can operate in a more ethical and fair manner. Otherwise, it could well see its empire fragmented, just like AT&T or Standard Oil before it, marking the end of an era. 3. European fines, a persistent pain. For several years, the European Union has established itself as one of the toughest regulators in the world for tech giants, with Google as its main target. The European Commission has imposed record fines on the company for practices deemed anti-competitive. These sanctions are intended to curb Google's dominance in key areas such as online search, digital advertising, and operating systems. They also mark a turning point in how governments and regulators perceive and treat tech companies. A record weighed down by repeated offenses. Since 2017, Google has accumulated colossal fines in Europe, accumulating a total of more than 8 billion euros in penalties. These fines concern several aspects of its activity. 2.4 billion euros, 2017. Favoritism for Google Shopping. The European Commission accused Google of abusing its dominant position by favoring its own price comparison tool, Google Shopping, in its search results. This practice would have distorted competition by disadvantaging other price comparators, making them less visible to users. This case was a first warning for Google, revealing the European Union's willingness to tackle the unfair practices of large technology companies. 4.3 billion euros, 2018. Abuse of dominant position with Android. This sanction was the highest ever imposed by the European Commission. It concerned Google's practices of requiring Android smartphone manufacturers to pre-install its services, such as Google Search and Chrome, as conditions for accessing the Play Store. This strategy was deemed anti-competitive because it prevented users from having access to viable alternatives. A 1.5 billion, 2019. Restrictive contracts in online advertising. In this case, the European Commission found that Google had abused its dominant position in the online search advertising market. By imposing restrictive clauses on its advertising partners, Google has limited their ability to work with competing platforms, thus locking in its dominance in the sector. Fines that go beyond the financial aspect. Although these fines represent considerable sums, they remain manageable for a company the size of Google, which generates annual revenues exceeding $280 billion. However, their impact goes far beyond the financial sphere. These sanctions have three major implications. A challenge to Google's legitimacy. These decisions weaken Google's image in Europe, where it is increasingly perceived as an actor abusing its power to crush competition. This could harm the company's relationship with its users and business partners. A regulatory precedent. Regulators in other regions, such as Asia and Latin America, are inspired by European decisions to launch their own investigations into Google's business practices. The European Union has thus paved the way for stricter global regulation of tech giants, a brake on innovation at Google. These fines are often accompanied by binding directives that require Google to change its business practices. These adjustments can limit the company's flexibility and slow down the deployment of new technologies or services. Why is the European Union so firm? Europe's rigor towards Google is explained by several factors. First, the European Union takes a proactive approach to ensuring fair competition in its market, believing that large technology companies should not benefit from unfair advantages. Second, European legislators seek to protect consumers by ensuring that available choices are not dictated by abusive business practices. Finally, these decisions reflect a broader desire to reduce Europe's dependence on U.S. technology companies. By sanctioning Google, the European Commission is sending a strong message to all big tech. Monopolistic behavior will not be tolerated. Consequences for the entire digital ecosystem. The actions taken against Google have repercussions far beyond the company itself. They encourage the emergence of alternatives in several sectors. Price comparators. Companies like Idealo or Kelku have been able to regain ground on the European market thanks to increased exposure in search results. Operating systems. Players like Huawei have intensified their efforts to develop alternatives to Android, reducing their dependence on Google. Digital advertising. New advertising platforms are emerging, offering more transparent and competitive options for advertisers. A future under surveillance. The European Union does not intend to stop there. New regulations, such as the Digital Markets Act, DMA, aim to further limit the power of gatekeepers like Google, which control essential web infrastructure. This text imposes strict obligations on tech giants, such as the interoperability of services and the prohibition of practices deemed unfair. In addition, investigations are underway to examine other aspects of Google's activities, including its role in the collection and use of personal data. Europe could thus continue to impose fines and restrictions, increasing the pressure on the Mountain View giant. Conclusion: a Europe resolved to act. The fines imposed on Google by the European Union are not just financial penalties, they represent a direct attack on the tech giant's business model. By targeting practices deemed abusive, the European Commission seeks to rebalance the digital market, giving competitors a chance to compete and consumers a greater diversity of choices. For Google, Europe has become a battleground where it must constantly defend its practices and adjust its strategies. This dynamic could have a lasting impact on the way the company operates, not only in Europe, but also globally. Unless Google manages to radically reform its approach, regulators will continue to monitor it closely, turning each offense into a new, persistent pain. 4. Online advertising, Google's Achilles heel. Online advertising is the beating heart of Google's financial empire, accounting for more than 80% of its total revenue. In 2023, the company's advertising revenue reached nearly $238 billion, highlighting the extent of its dominance in this market. However, this dominant position is attracting increased scrutiny from international regulators, who are questioning the transparency and fairness of Google's practices in digital advertising. International investigations and allegations of anti-competitive practices. Several countries have launched in-depth investigations into Google's advertising practices, suspecting anti-competitive behavior that could harm competition and consumers. European Union. In June 2021, the European Commission opened a formal investigation to determine whether Google favored its own online advertising technology services to the detriment of competitors, advertisers, and online publishers. This investigation aims to assess whether Google is restricting third-party access to user data for advertising purposes, while reserving this valuable information for its own services, thereby creating a competitive imbalance. Canada. In November 2024, the Canadian Competition Bureau filed a lawsuit against Google, accusing it of abusing its power in the digital advertising market. The investigation, which began in 2020, found that Google has engaged in practices to consolidate its dominance to the detriment of advertisers and publishers by controlling every step of the advertising chain. Australia. An Australian parliamentary report accused Google of holding a dominant position at every stage of the advertising chain, thus limiting competition and increasing costs for advertisers. This could lead to higher prices for products and services for consumers as companies pass on the increased advertising costs. Google's contested practices in the advertising sector. International investigations highlight several practices of Google deemed problematic. Control of the advertising chain. Google is present at almost every level of the supply chain when it comes to online advertising, allowing it to promote its own services and exclude competitors. Exclusive agreements. Google has reportedly entered into agreements with key partners such as Meta, formerly Facebook, to strengthen its position in the online advertising market to the detriment of competition. Restricting access to data. By restricting access to user data to its own services, Google prevents competitors from offering competitive advertising solutions, thereby distorting the market. Potential consequences for Google. If these investigations lead to unfavorable conclusions for Google, the company could face severe penalties, including substantial fines. Financial penalties could be imposed, as was previously the case with the European Union, which imposed fines totaling more than $8 billion on Google for anti-competitive practices. Data sharing obligations. Google could be forced to share some of its advertising data with competitors, leveling the playing field and reducing its competitive advantage. Operational restrictions. Limitations could be imposed on how Google integrates its advertising services, potentially affecting its effectiveness and profitability. Impact on Google's business model. As online advertising is Google's primary revenue driver, any disruption in this sector could have significant repercussions for its entire business model. A reduction in its advertising dominance could lead to lower revenues, limiting its ability to invest in other technological areas and innovate. In addition, increased regulatory oversight could force Google to rethink its business strategies, placing greater emphasis on transparency and fairness, which could slow its growth and affect its market position. In short, international investigations into Google's advertising practices highlight the vulnerabilities of an economic model that is heavily dependent on online advertising. The results of these investigations could not only reshape the digital advertising landscape, but also determine Google's future as a global technology leader. 5. A contested domination in AI. For several years, Google has positioned itself as an undisputed leader in the field of artificial intelligence, AI, notably thanks to the advances of its subsidiary DeepMind and the development of its own chatbot, Bard. However, the rapid emergence of OpenAI and its flagship model, ChatGPT, has upset this balance, challenging Google's supremacy in this strategic sector. The emergence of ChatGPT, a decisive turning point. Launched in November 2022, OpenAI's ChatGPT quickly captured the attention of the general public and professionals with its advanced conversational capabilities and versatility. This meteoric success has highlighted OpenAI's ability to innovate and offer powerful AI solutions, challenging established players such as Google. Faced with this rise, Google accelerated the development and deployment of Bard, its own AI-based conversational agent. However, the haste of this initiative has led to mixed results. During its initial presentation, Bard made notable factual errors, which tainted its credibility and raised questions about the preparation and reliability of the tool. Comparison between Bard and ChatGPT. Although Bard has real-time access to information on the web, providing up-to-date answers, this feature was not enough to outperform ChatGPT in terms of overall performance. Comparative analyses revealed that ChatGPT outperformed Bard in several areas, including response accuracy and contextual understanding. For example, one study scored 6-1 in favor of ChatGPT when tested on various questions, highlighting Bard's shortcomings in its current beta version. In addition, users expressed preferences for ChatGPT because of its ability to provide more complete and nuanced answers, while Bard was perceived as less reliable and less consistent in its interactions. Implications for Google's image. This loss of leadership in the field of AI has profound implications for Google's image as a technology innovator. The company, once seen as a pioneer in innovation, now finds itself in a position of follower, trying to catch up with more agile and daring competitors. This raises questions about Google's ability to maintain its competitive edge in a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The delays and errors associated with the launch of Bard have highlighted internal challenges, including a fragmented organizational structure and risk aversion, which have hampered the company's ability to innovate effectively. In response, Google has undertaken internal reorganizations and increased its investments in AI to regain its leadership position. However, the intense competition and rapid advances of players like OpenAI make this a daunting task, requiring a clear strategy and flawless execution to restore the trust of users and investors. In short, Google's contested dominance in AI highlights the challenges tech giants face in staying at the forefront of innovation. Google's ability to overcome these obstacles will determine its future role in the artificial intelligence ecosystem. 5. A contested domination in AI. For several years, Google has positioned itself as an undisputed leader in the field of artificial intelligence, AI, notably thanks to the advances of its subsidiary DeepMind and the development of its own chatbot, Bard. However, the rapid emergence of OpenAI and its flagship model, ChatGPT, has upset this balance, challenging Google's supremacy in this strategic sector. The emergence of ChatGPT, a decisive turning point. Launched in November 2022, OpenAI's ChatGPT quickly captured the attention of the general public and professionals with its advanced conversational capabilities and versatility. This meteoric success has highlighted OpenAI's ability to innovate and offer powerful AI solutions, challenging established players such as Google. Faced with this rise, Google accelerated the development and deployment of Bard, its own AI-based conversational agent. However, the haste of this initiative has led to mixed results. During its initial presentation, Bard made notable factual errors, which tainted its credibility and raised questions about the preparation and reliability of the tool. Comparison between Bard and ChatGPT. Although Bard has real-time access to information on the web, providing up-to-date answers, this feature was not enough to outperform ChatGPT in terms of overall performance. Comparative analyses revealed that ChatGPT outperformed Bard in several areas, including response accuracy and contextual understanding. For example, one study scored 6-1 in favor of ChatGPT when tested on various questions, highlighting Bard's shortcomings in its current beta version. In addition, users expressed preferences for ChatGPT because of its ability to provide more complete and nuanced answers, while Bard was perceived as less reliable and less consistent in its interactions. Implications for Google's image. This loss of leadership in the field of AI has profound implications for Google's image as a technology innovator. The company, once seen as a pioneer in innovation, now finds itself in a position of follower, trying to catch up with more agile and daring competitors. This raises questions about Google's ability to maintain its competitive edge in a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The delays and errors associated with the launch of Bard have highlighted internal challenges, including a fragmented organizational structure and risk aversion, which have hampered the company's ability to innovate effectively. In response, Google has undertaken internal reorganizations and increased its investments in AI to regain its leadership position. However, the intense competition and rapid advances of players like OpenAI make this a daunting task, requiring a clear strategy and flawless execution to restore the trust of users and investors. In short, Google's contested dominance in AI highlights the challenges tech giants face in staying at the forefront of innovation. Google's ability to overcome these barriers will determine its future role in the artificial intelligence ecosystem. 6. An end to AltaVista? AltaVista, once the undisputed king of search engines in the late 1990s, marked a time when web browsing was still in its infancy. With a significant technological advantage for the time, AltaVista established itself as the gateway to the web for millions of users. However, in the space of just a few years, it was swept away by more agile and innovative competitors, notably Google, which capitalized on strategic and technological gaps to establish itself as the new online search giant. Today, history seems ready to repeat itself, but this time, Google could be in the role of AltaVista. Indeed, the company, which has long embodied innovation and domination on the web, is now facing challenges of unprecedented magnitude, whether it is growing competition, changing user expectations, or increasingly stringent international regulations. AltaVista, a lesson in history. To understand why some see similarities between the fate of AltaVista and Google's current situation, it is essential to look at what led to the fall of this search engine pioneer. At its peak, AltaVista was the preferred search engine of internet users, offering advanced features and unprecedented speed. However, several strategic mistakes precipitated its downfall. Increasing complexity. AltaVista tried to become an all-in-one web portal, adding a multitude of unnecessary features that weighed down its interface and degraded the user experience. Inability to innovate. Despite its initial success, AltaVista failed to anticipate the changing needs of internet users, particularly in terms of simplicity and relevance of search results. The arrival of Google. In 1998, Google introduced a revolutionary algorithm, PageRank, which offered more accurate and better-ranked search results. Its simplicity and efficiency quickly won over users, eclipsing AltaVista. In less than 5 years, AltaVista was relegated to a relic of the past, unable to catch up with a more innovative competitor. Google, a threatened position. In many ways, Google is now in a similar position to AltaVista 2 decades ago. While the company has long dominated the digital landscape, it faces challenges that could jeopardize its supremacy. Increased competition. Google must now compete with players like OpenAI, which are redefining user expectations with more interactive AI-based solutions. For example, the rise of ChatGPT, integrated with tools like Bing, threatens to divert some of the traffic traditionally captured by Google search. User experience criticism. Although Google Search remains the dominant search engine, many users complain about the overload of advertisements and biased results. Alternatives like Neva and Brave, which focus on privacy and simplicity, are attracting a growing number of users who want to escape invasive advertising. Stifling regulations, regulatory pressures, whether antitrust investigations or fines for abuse of dominant position, limit Google's ability to operate freely. These constraints, combined with new data privacy laws, call into question its business model based on the massive collection of personal information. Unlearned lessons and potential risks. AltaVista fell because of its inability to adapt to a constantly changing environment. Google, although more resilient, seems to be repeating some mistakes. Too much diversification. Like AltaVista, Google sometimes seems to spread its efforts across various projects, such as Waymo, self-driving cars, or Google Glass, without always turning these initiatives into commercial successes. Late response to innovation. The arrival of Bard, designed as a hasty response to ChatGPT, illustrates Google's difficulty in anticipating and responding quickly to emerging threats. Organizational rigidity. As a tech giant, Google suffers from a complex structure that slows down its agility in the face of more dynamic and daring startups. Can Google be saved? Unlike AltaVista, Google boasts colossal resources, a massive user base, and a global footprint. These assets could enable it to avoid a sudden downfall, provided it takes decisive action. Reinventing the user experience. Google needs to simplify its interface, reduce the amount of advertising, and improve the relevance of search results to remain attractive. Invest in innovation. The company needs to accelerate the development of more efficient and better integrated AI solutions while exploring new opportunities, such as conversational interfaces or voice search systems. Collaborate with regulators. To avoid further sanctions, Google must take a more proactive approach to transparency and compliance. A story that may repeat itself. The parallel between AltaVista and Google is both a warning and a reminder that even the most powerful giants can be toppled. AltaVista underestimated how quickly the digital landscape could evolve, and Google risks making the same mistake if it fails to respond effectively to current challenges. As players like OpenAI redefine user expectations and regulators seek to limit its power, Google is at a crossroads. Either the company manages to reinvent itself and strengthen its relevance, or it faces a gradual decline, similar to that of AltaVista. Google's future depends on its ability to innovate, adapt, and regain user trust. The question remains, can Google avoid becoming a relic of the past, or are we witnessing the beginning of the end for the Mountain View giant? Conclusion. Can Google resist? Google, once the undisputed symbol of innovation and technological dominance, now finds itself at a critical crossroads. The challenges facing the company are not mere temporary obstacles, but profound and existential threats that could redefine its future. Between mounting pressure from regulators, the emergence of bold competitors like OpenAI, and increasingly demanding consumers, the Mountain View giant must reinvent itself to stay relevant in a constantly evolving technological landscape. A storm of converging factors. International regulators are working to limit Google's monopolistic influence through antitrust lawsuits and record fines. Meanwhile, companies like OpenAI are redefining user expectations with disruptive technologies, directly threatening Google's pillars such as online search and digital advertising. Finally, consumers, weary of an experience sometimes saturated with advertising and concerned about the collection of their personal data, are turning to simpler, more transparent, and privacy-friendly alternatives. History as a warning. The history of fallen tech giants, such as AltaVista, Netscape, and Nokia, teaches us that even the most dominant leaders can be toppled if they fail to evolve. AltaVista, in particular, offers a striking lesson. It is not enough to be the first or the biggest. You have to constantly adapt to changing expectations and new technologies. Google, which once embodied this disruption against AltaVista, could now fall into the same trap. If the company continues to rely on its traditional business models without responding to new market demands, it risks becoming a relic of the past, overshadowed by more innovative and agile players. Keys to survival. Google's survival depends not only on its ability to innovate, but also on its willingness to radically transform its business model and strategy. Here are the axes on which the giant could act to avoid a decline. Strengthen consumer confidence. Google must regain user trust by adopting greater transparency on the use of personal data and reducing its reliance on intrusive advertising models. Investing in more fluid user experiences that are less saturated with advertising and focused on the needs of internet users could make a difference. Adopt a proactive response to regulators. Rather than fighting regulations, Google could embrace these changes as an opportunity to set new industry standards. This could not only limit financial penalties, but also improve its public image as a responsible actor, reinventing the search experience. With the emergence of ChatGPT and other conversational AI systems, Google needs to redefine what it means to search the web. Integrating more robust and user-friendly AI capabilities into its search tools could position it as a pioneer once again. Diversify its revenue sources. Currently, Google relies heavily on digital advertising, which accounts for more than 80% of its revenue. Developing sectors such as cloud computing, home automation, or emerging technologies, AI, augmented reality, etc., could provide resilience in the face of fluctuations in the advertising market. Adopt an innovation-driven strategy. Google has the financial and intellectual resources to carry out ambitious projects. However, it must ensure that these innovations resonate with users, avoiding hasty or poorly executed launches such as Bard. The beginning of a new era? Google's future is uncertain, but one thing is certain. The global technology landscape is changing, and this change could reshuffle the deck. If Google manages to reinvent and adapt itself, it could not only maintain its dominant position, but also usher in a new era of innovation. However, the Mountain View giant will have to fight like never before. Its future will depend on its ability to listen to the market, meet user expectations, and navigate a complex regulatory environment. Can Google avoid becoming another AltaVista? Only time will tell. What is certain is that the technology world is watching closely, and that every misstep could accelerate a fall that no one would have imagined just a few years ago. For Google, the moment of truth has arrived.